Welcome back to the weekend. I'm Eugene along with Jackie Alemany and Jonathan Capehart. We're going to get a camera that just follows us during the break. Grab that extra shot of some espresso because we have a big hour ahead, including Senator Bill Cassidy's loss in the Louisiana Republican primary and what it means for other critics of Donald Trump facing elections next week and beyond. We'll also talk to Congresswoman Terry Sewell of Alabama about the protests she joined in her state to protect voting rights, what the Republican rush to redraw congressional maps could mean for the midterms. And we'll explain why ICE is moving ahead with plans to convert warehouses into immigration detention centers, despite growing opposition even in some red states. But we begin with the stakes of the 2026 midterms on full display this weekend. Protesters took to the streets yesterday to stand up for voting rights as Republicans in southern states rushed to redraw new congressional maps in their favor. The redistricting frenzy was triggered by the Supreme Court ruling gutting, basically killing the Voting Rights Act. And last night in Louisiana's Republican Senate primary, we got another seismic reminder of the major hold Trump has over the GOP. Incumbent Senator Bill Cassidy, who has been a vocal critic of Trump, lost his fight to keep his seat. He was one of 7 Republican senators to vote in favor of convicting Trump in his impeachment trial after the January 6th insurrection. Cassidy's 2 challengers, Congresswoman Julia Letlow, who Trump endorsed, and Louisiana State Treasurer John Fleming, who was Trump's deputy chief of staff in his first term, advanced to a runoff that would take place on June 27th. We'll obviously keep following this, but I think the continued story, we've talked about it at the top of the 7, and we will keep talking about it, is a reminder for all Republicans that either you can stand in your convictions or Donald Trump will take you out, or you can be mealy-mouthed and Donald Trump will take you out, or you be fully loyal and he keeps you for a little while, then eventually takes you out. So like that, those are the choices, it seems, for a lot of these Republicans.
And so, go ahead. Sorry, Jack, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay, fine. So given what Eugene just said, again, as I said at 7 o'clock, my eyes are on Texas as a result of what happened in Louisiana. Another person who has been bending over backwards to get Donald Trump to endorse him, talking about you, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, to get his endorsement in a runoff he's in against Ken Paxton, this deeply troubled, was he the state attorney general? Yeah, the state attorney general who's got more baggage than a Louis Vuitton store. And Cornyn is waiting for this endorsement. The primary runoff is in a few weeks, and it still hasn't come. And if I were Senator Cornyn right now, I'd be sweating bullets.
Yeah, it's in 1 week from Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I said this yesterday, but I think it's worth reiterating that the most consistent through line of the majority of the stories that we discuss on this show has been the president relitigating the result of the 2020 election. It is still the beating heart of the base. It is still and it is still what the president himself is trying to rewrite and relitigate via these elections and these now Republican primaries. What I would like to know more about is why Cassidy chose the route he's taken, right? I mean, this ousting is probably the most consequential since Trump successfully got rid of Liz Cheney when she supported her primary challenger, Harriet Hagman, who is still in the House several years ago. But Cassidy obviously took a very different route than Cheney. And meanwhile, you have another pretty sharp contrast to Cassidy in the Senate, Tom Tillis. He's someone who's resigning and has taken a very different approach, has not been milquetoast about his criticisms against Trump, has been straightforward and subtle. I mean, part of me was sort of initially thinking, okay, maybe these are, this is the difference between trying to get on a few boards post time in Congress versus not. I would love to have a sit down with Senator Cassidy. He is someone at the end of the day who, despite his doctor's degree and training, voted to install RFK. But I have for once
Jackie's got thoughts.
outlasted our host.
Lots of thoughts. Bill Cassidy, the first incumbent senator since 2012 to lose in a primary. Joining us now, Congresswoman Terry Sewell of Alabama. She attended the voting rights demonstrations in Selma and Montgomery yesterday. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. this fight that black voters, black representatives, and allies and accomplices throughout the country are taking on when it comes to voting rights is one that has been fought kind of in the shadows for a long time. What do you think it means that it's now in the daylight, and it feels like, I think, to a lot of voters, that those who want to create more voting opportunities for voters are a little bit behind the curveball? More voting opportunities for voters are a little bit behind the curveball.
You know, what we've seen from these southern states, this rush to get back and take away black political power is not new. You know, I represent Alabama's civil rights district, historic cities of Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, and my hometown of Selma. And we know that thousands and thousands of people literally gave of themselves and their lives for the right to vote. And we cannot go back. We won't go back. I think that that's what the protest, it wasn't really a protest. Yesterday was more about being a movement, a call to action, if you will. It was so inspirational to see so many people gather at the foot of the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama, where John Lewis and those foot soldiers ultimately ended up on that fateful march from Selma to Montgomery. And for us to hear speaker after speaker talk about why it's so important that we vote like our lives depend upon it, that the call to action is one for voter registration, voter turnout, mobilization, organization. It is not for being upset, bemoaning what's happened, but rather rolling up our sleeves and knowing that we have to act in this moment. And, you know, it's not a protest. It was a call to action. It was, you know, a movement. We hope that we'll go to other state capitals all throughout the South this summer. We need a freedom summer, if you will, where we are literally standing on the steps of these state courthouses and demanding that we don't go back, and that demanding political and representation for African Americans. You know, when one voice is muted in our democracy, it affects all of us. And I cannot believe that in spite of a Supreme Court going against its own reversing, you know, decades of precedent, that the state, we have an election this Tuesday, a primary election where 4 congressional districts, the votes for those, which have already been underway. In fact, I've already voted absentee since we were supposed to be out of session this coming Tuesday. But those votes will not count. Not count in a democracy? I mean, it's irreparable harm to so many who've casted their ballots already. We have military constituents of mine that are already being shipped off to Iran and voted early. We have elderly folks who already have voted, and all those ballots will be cast out. It's simply unacceptable. I can't believe that under our collective watch, we're seeing such amazing progress that our foremothers and forefathers fought, bled, marched for, be eroded before our very eyes.
Congresswoman, on that point, I'm just wondering, and I know you said we shouldn't, you know, folks should not despair, but why shouldn't black folks despair over the situation that we as a community are in particular, but we as a nation are in general, when obstacles have been thrown up in our way to register to vote, to turn out to vote, to mobilize? What do you say to black voters, to black people who look at this time and say, you know what? Why bother when the country is literally turning its back on us?
Well, I think that, you know, obviously people are upset, people feel powerless, but we have to know that our power lies in our collective action. And so our foremothers and forefathers probably felt helpless too. They had far less tools. Probably felt helpless too. They had far less tools than we had, and yet they still persisted. And so what I'm saying is we can lick our wounds, we can be upset, but what we cannot be is deterred. We have to figure out a way to make a way out of no way, because that's what they did. And they did it with far less tools to their disposal, you know, with far more hatred far more blatant hatred. I just think that what we have to remind people of is that we're fighting not just for some representation or no representation. We're fighting for fair representation. And in a state like Alabama, where 28% of the voting population are African American, almost a third, almost 1 in 3 people in Alabama are African American. We have 7 seats in Congress, and we deserve 2 seats. That is fair representation. And so we will stop at nothing less. It's not about trying to save my seat or only Shamari's seat or no seats. It's about saving both of our seats in the name of fair representation. And, we're not asking for, preferential treatment. We're just asking for fair treatment when this happens. So I really do hope that we turn that despair, turn that anger into action. The Bible says we can pray, but we have to move our feet at the same time.
Faith without work is dead, honey. The man said it.
Hello. Absolutely. I was in Selma before the march. There were a congregation of about 1,000 or so faith leaders who led a march from Tabernacle Church to the Edmund Pettus Bridge and prayed on that bridge like John Lewis and Martin Luther King did, and really set the tone in my mind for this fight ahead. This is about moral clarity. This is about harnessing the power of the Black church, not only to be a voice for us, but to be a place where we can organize and mobilize the vote. I'm not trying to mess up their 501c3 status, but what I am saying is we need to start looking inward. It was ordinary people in Selma, my hometown, a 26-year-old John Lewis that had the audacity to make this nation live up to its highest ideals of, fairness, of equality and justice. And we need to take a page from their playbook. We also need to know that we have more tools at our disposal. We have to litigate. We have to legislate. We have to do everything we possibly can. I carry the seminal piece of legislation, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and I am in the process, along with a lot of legal minds, redrafting that bill to address the Calais decision, to address the Shelby decision, to put preclearance back in by using a modern day formula, and to get rid of partisan gerrymandering. It needs to be outlawed. And every Democrat has already voted on the record to get rid of partisan gerrymandering. And every Republican voted for the record to keep it. And we just have to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to fight back. Because I don't know about you, but I ain't going back to the days when we had no representation.
That is why we will be watching this week a federal court hearing on May 22nd on the new Alabama congressional map.
Absolutely. And we expect to win that. We expect to win that, and we hope that that will stand.
We'll have you back on to discuss. Up next, how ICE is moving forward to convert warehouses into detention facilities despite mounting legal challenges. Watching the weekend. ICE is moving forward with its plan. ICE is moving forward with its plan to convert warehouses across the country into mass immigration detention centers. It is doing so despite active lawsuits from multiple states. A brand new Inspector General probe into whether the government overpaid for the buildings. And just this week, a Georgia town of fewer than 5,500 people suing to stop a facility for 10,000 detainees from opening up in their backyard. A town, by the way, that gave Donald Trump nearly 3/4 of their vote in 2024. Joining us now is Andrea Flores, founder of Securing America's Promise and former DHS official in the Obama administration. Andrea, thanks for coming on set this morning.
Thank you.
This $38 billion plan, there's going to be in 11 towns, 8 states, and holding detainees for up to 60 days before they are deported. What is the end game for the administration when you look at the outlines of this plan?
I mean, the end game is to deport as many people as possible, but more importantly, the end game is to make these detention facilities as miserable and as inhumane as possible, so that way people voluntarily self-deport, making their job in many ways easier. We've seen that in the existing detention facilities. The conditions are not up to any standards. We're seeing deaths hit new records. We're seeing basic medical care And so there's no way in the current plans that I've seen that they can keep people safe, and 60 days is too much, and they're using detention as a punishment, and that is not an appropriate use of detention, and we should be really concerned about this expansion right now.
Because detention is not supposed to be punitive. They're not supposed to be treated as if they're in jail.
Yes.
To your point, USA Today wrote about the conditions worsening at California immigration detention centers. At multiple facilities, detainees reported overcrowding, undercooked food, inadequate clothing, and poor access to clean drinking water, Brabanta said. That's what you hear from everybody who's gone in, talked to anyone that's against this for a lot of reasons. They don't want to be the location where these kinds of things are happening. They're big and ugly. Like, there's a lot of reasons why people did it. What does it tell you that there's such a gap between the immigration politics that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Mark Wayne Mullen, the new DHS secretary, are doing, and the on-the-ground reality with how even his voters are taking this all in?
Well, to me, it means they're so deeply committed to their extreme agenda still, even though there seems to be a narrative growing that Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen is de-escalating, doing things more professionally than Noam.
Or quietly.
You could do things quietly, and you can still have an extreme political agenda. And so they don't seem to care about any part except their most extreme, members of their base. Yeah. And it's interesting. There's bipartisan opposition to these warehouses. They do not care. Right, because what they care is about getting their numbers, and they want to change the demographics of this country. It is a project to change demographics. They're doing that in voting rights. They're doing that here with immigration. These are all connected issues, and now we have a new face of the problem, and they can keep blaming Noam. But there is so much corruption also in these plans, which the American people, I think, are going to continue to reject. I mean, billions of dollars. People are losing food stamps, and we're building warehouse detention centers so you can send senior citizens to go be detained for 60 days. Yeah. Like, that's what the president is doing.
Speaking of senior citizens, the Associated Press reported on May 12th, 85-year-old French widow caught in Trump's immigration crackdown describes her detention. She was held in a dormitory-style room with 58 other women, mostly mothers, quote, "Some of them didn't know where their children were," she said. "I think it's terrible for a woman not to know where her children are." That also in the story was this that jumped out at me. Everybody was talking so loudly so everybody could hear what they were saying. But when silence came, you could hear children crying and even babies crying, she said. "There's babies in this jail."
So that is a policy choice that this country does not need to make. Children cannot be safely detained. And pediatricians have come out and said this. Multiple public health experts have said the lifelong trauma those children will face is a policy choice we're making when alternatives exist. Right. You can enforce immigration law and not put families in detention. And they want us to believe that that is the normal. And I am concerned about a lot of Democrats, I think, are doing a really good job of highlighting the stories of detention, but what is the next step? Because when you get someone out of detention, there's no path to stability, legal status, or options for them. They're probably eventually going to go back to detention. So detention is just one stop on a path that has to still be fixed. And so you have to see it in the context of it's one part of the abuse these families will face. But you do not need to detain families. There are alternatives that are legal, that are safe, and that also help people comply.
Can we talk a little bit more about this? I'm obviously not as steeped in the literature and sort of the research around this, but a story that I read yesterday that I shared with everyone that's really harrowing is a woman who was detained and asked to keep her baby. That was not heeded by the immigration officers. Her 2-year-old was left with an abusive uncle because that was the only family member still in the United States who was available to take care of him. And the uncle went on to abuse him and kill him and is now being charged with negligent homicide, amongst other things, sexual battery. Really, really horrible story by Maria Chetty at the Washington Post. So what are the other options? I mean, if I were a mom, even if it was probably a worst case scenario, if I were a mom who were being detained and it was worst case scenario to bring my child with me, I would still want to.
Absolutely. I mean, parents should choose. And if a parent decides they want to stay with their child, there are ways to do that without having to be detained. Right? So that's step one. If a parent chooses to leave the country, why is that child not allowed to go with that mother? That was a preventable tragedy. I mean, we will look back on some of these stories as some of the greatest human rights kind of consequences that we all contributed to. And that child should be alive today. And so, but when you're trying to hit thousands of numbers and you're trying to hit a number of 1 million in a year, you don't have the time to do what old, ICE policies would have allowed, which was to say, let's wait. Let's make sure you can be reunited with your child, and then you can go with your child. They don't seem to be doing any of that due diligence. They don't take the fact that people have minor children into account. There's more reporting that they're marking that people do not have children. I mean, there are still thousands of children not reunited with their families from the first Trump administration. And that is a policy problem, and it's a governing problem for future Democrats if they have power again.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but of course, and sadly, you will be back. We will have you back to talk more about this. Andrea Flores, thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come, more on the fallout over Senator Bill Cassidy's loss and what it could mean for other Trump critics facing elections next week. Plus, you can listen to every episode of The Weekend as a podcast for free. Scan. Senator Bill Cassidy's primary election upset in Louisiana last night shows President Trump's influence won out as he sends a clear message to the Republican Party. Cross me and I'll end your political career. Now the president is looking to expand his revenge tour even further, going after longtime MAGA ally Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert and Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie. Trump wrote on social media last night, quote, Boebert is campaigning for the worst Republican, in quotes, congressman in the history of our country, Thomas Massie, of the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, and nobody who can be that dumb deserves a good primary fight. Oh, Lord, we have a lot to discuss with a great panel. Joining us, Ophira Yeskel, Director of External Affairs for the Democratic Governors Association, and Republican strategist and MSNOW political analyst Matthew Bartlett, who also served as an appointee to the State Department in Trump's first term. Okay, Matthew, given what the president said about Boebert and Massie, Thomas Massie was on ABC this morning. And Massie said, in summary, every time Trump tweets about him, it helps his campaign. True, or is he going to go down in a ball of flames like Senator Cassidy last night?
Yeah, that might be some projection because the reality is hitting the windshield right now in this MAGA retribution rampage. We saw this in Indiana. We saw this last night, and now you have the horizon where you have Kentucky, where you have even Texas. Listen, an elephant never forgets, but it appears that MAGA never forgives. And this is something of a de-Ba'athification of the Republican Party as Trump, not just a realignment, but really changes this, to model himself.
I have the direct quote from Congressman Massie. I think that's going to help my fundraising. He gives his fundraising address. Every time he tweets something, it's good for some money coming in because people don't like that.
Also, I think is doing a lot of work there. Ophira, one of the things, it was this week, right? where Trump, it's hard to remember anymore. But I assume a quote that you and your team and every single governor that you guys work with will be using a lot is something that the president doubled down on Friday in the interview. Let's play that E5, Renee.
When you're negotiating with Iran, Mr. President, to what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation.
That's right. That's a perfect statement. I make it again. When people hear me say it, everybody agrees. Short-term pain. It's going to be short-term pain. But the pain is much less than people thought. And that question was a fake question, and they didn't put my full answer. I totally care. Look, I inherited high prices. And they came in with the word affordability.
There's a lot of quotes in there that you could use, including the pain is much less than some people thought, especially for people who can't pay for their groceries.
I mean, Christmas came early for Democratic ad makers this week. I think they're just saying, keep talking. This is really helpful for, I think, any Democrat on the ballot who wants to remind the American people, the president does not care one little inch about you and the financial pain that you are feeling right now. And James Carville had it right in the 90s. It's the economy, stupid. That is what is on people's minds. And Democrats have a real opportunity to really hammer home that we are the party thinking about affordability, how to low cost, that Trump did not live up to his day one promise to do that. But I think also Trump last night made it very clear that if you are not in lockstep with him on his agenda, which is disastrous for the American people, you are against him. And that means that every Republican who is on the ballot this year has to defend that agenda that is disastrous and polling really badly. We're seeing that he's really lost his advantage on the economy, and I think that will be something that every Republican this cycle has to pay for.
What's the balance for Democrats, for all of you, as you move toward November, on talking about the economy every single day and talking about voting rights and democracy? How do you balance those two?
I think it's both. I mean, we have had success on the governor level talking about how we're going to lower your costs, but also how we're going to fight for your fundamental freedoms. I think that is a choice that could not be more glaring for the American people right now. We're seeing Republican governors immediately go on the attack against voting rights in the South to extinguish the voices of people in this country so their voices are not heard. But also, the economy is the number one issue for people. And so when Democrats are talking every single day about how we're going to lower your costs against the backdrop of the president saying, I don't care at all, you cannot make me care, and I'm going to keep telling you every single day, I don't think that's the last time we'll hear him say he does not care about the economy. And the American people are listening. I think it's really sinking into them that Republicans are in lockstep with Trump. And if you're looking at any Republican, whether it's John James in Michigan, Andy Biggs in Arizona, it's loud and clear that they are not going to dissent from the president. That means that they also are not caring about costs.
But the fight for fundamental freedoms, that's something that we've talked about a lot on this show today with interviews with Senator Cory Booker, Terry Sewell, and it's something that I think has not been very salient for voters. It hasn't been a priority even now. The top issue is the economy. I mean, how do Democrats go about talking about those two things hand in hand during a moment where it is really an existential crisis?
Well, who's in office right now, I think, has never mattered more, whether it is your governor, whether it is who has control of Congress right now. I think we're seeing that Republicans with full control of the government are talking about serving themselves. They're cutting health care for people. They're doing tax cuts for the rich, rippling health care gallon. I don't think anybody at home wants to hear that. And so I think there is a real opening for Democrats to say, we're the party thinking about you, whether it is on any issue you care about. The economy is number one, obviously, but we also want to make sure that you are heard, that you're seeing that folks in Washington are listening to you. And so I think Republicans, again, tied to Trump, he has made it so you cannot have an inch of any kind of room to say that you are not in alignment with anything that he's working on.
Matthew and Ophira, I'm going to show you something. And
okay.
I'm calling out both your names because I want both of you to react to what Jesse Waters had to say on Fox on Thursday. And you can tell by my tone that is not good. Watch this.
I did some research on the blacks, as Judge Eugene so eloquently would say. The solution to Hakeem's problem, this gay Obama, is baby making. Blacks, for 150 years, have only represented 10 to 15% of the American population, okay? That's not that much. So if they want to have more seats, they got to get in between the sheets.
Matthew? The blatant racism of what Jesse Waters said, I'm glad we had the time to play it because it's not just galling what he said, it's that he said it and has received not one bit of pushback from Fox, from Republicans, from anybody. All that was missing was the hood.
Yeah.
And so what, just your reaction to what he said.
Yeah, I mean, happy to say I mean, happy to say that I hadn't seen that clip before, and it's pretty stupid. Listen, when you don't have a message, when you don't have any good news, you start talking nonsense, and sometimes that nonsense turns into racial nonsense. That's a problem. That's more than a problem. It's disgraceful. And who is this appealing to? I have no idea. So if you're asking,
I got some ideas.
Oh, no, I know exactly who it's appealing to. It's that audience. But Afira, you know, we're used to hearing stuff like that behind the scenes. We're used to hearing stuff like that, maybe even in public. But we're not used to hearing stuff like that on television from someone with a national television show and someone who has, you know, is of some regard within his institution. I don't know. At this point, I'm just ranting, but I would love to get your reaction to Jesse Waters.
Well, it's abhorrent what he said. I think that goes without saying, that that's not something you want to be hearing from. But I think it does go to show where folks are in the Republican Party. I mean, and we're seeing that, again, it's not just what they're saying, it's also what they're doing. And we're seeing Republicans immediately move on the ball to go after voting rights in the South after the SCOTUS decision last week, showing, I think, that black representation, that voters of color want to be extinguished, that they see that that is a way for them to hold on to power. And it's obviously not a sustainable way for the country to move forward. And so I think, again, we've been talking about how high the stakes are for midterms. That is something that is really key for everybody to keep in mind, is who is going to be fighting for you to have your voice heard. Democrats, I think, every single day are reminding people who they care about, and really it is every single person in the country.
All my people out there, all I want you to know is be careful how you say the word blacks. You start sounding a little... I want to move on to, there's a 9-hour prayer festival that is going to be hosted. Careful how you say the word blacks. You start sounding a little... I want to move on to, there's a 9-hour prayer festival that is going to be hosted by the White House. It's going to be on the Christian...
Rough morning for Matthew. Rough morning.
Always fun coming in on Sunday morning.
Okay. And one of the quotes in the story from Washington Post, I'm unaware of anything like this with this involvement of senior government officials on this scale trying to paint this false picture of the United States as a quote-unquote Christian nation. Trump's rhetoric in the past 18 months is how he's going to make America Christian again. That it's his job to push religion. This is all part of that piece. I'd also like to remind people about the Jesus picture where he said he was actually a doctor.
But also it's worth pointing out who said that. This is a woman who is the head of a Baptist group that aims to promote religious liberties through the separation of church and state.
Because unlike what so much, I think Sidney King is the producer on this, John Adams, 1797, as the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Thomas Jefferson, Christianity neither is nor is a part of the common law. James Madison, religion and government will both exist in great purity the less they are mixed together. Thomas Jefferson, y'all know him, 1786, no man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever. We have seen this administration time and time again using Christianity to their political ends, and think that's not what about Christianity is about. I don't think that's what these guys thought either.
Yeah, fair critique, right? You try to be respectful of anyone's religion.
Yeah, we love church.
Amen. And you take the blessings wherever you can get them. We saw Obama have a faith office. So some of this is germane, and some of this is incredibly new and kind of weird. I try not to, certainly don't want to ever judge anyone's faith. No. But it kind of appears as if the president kind of caters to the Christian community almost as a client, like as an institution and function of government. This is something that, again, raises eyes. We're going to have a lot of people out there praying. Let me just be clear. Maybe this is the GOP because we have no message, we have no ideas, no deliverables, so maybe we're down to prayer.
Yeah, bring in the big guy. Afira Yesko and Matthew Barlas. Oh, my God, not Donald Trump. Thank you both for coming to the weekend. When we come back, we'll break down the three things the three of us are keeping an eye on and what you need to know for your week ahead. You're watching The Weekend only on MS Now.
موت صل وسلم دائما أبدا على الحبيب الذي أجاءنا هدى. يا رب بالنور أكرم مهجتي واغفر ذنوبي وهون كربتي. أنت الرجاء إذا ضاقت بنا الدنيا وبذكرك العالي تحيا روحنا. الله يا مولانا أنت الرحيم وأنت هادينا. الله يا رحمن بنورك اجعل قلوبنا إيمان. صلوا على طه الرسول محمد خير البرية والنور المؤيد من بالصلاة عليه نال راحة والقلب من أنواره يتجدد. يا ربنا اجعلنا على درب الهدى واختم بالخيرات أعمارنا مدى. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على الحبيب المصطفى